Welcome, Dale, in the first place, as our first guest of this first DigiCafé initiative of EAF. And I'm Liliana Diaz. I'm part of the board of directors, and it's my pleasure to host this conversation. The idea is for Dale to share her insights, where our industry is headed, the role of Europe. We're going to discuss a little bit about that, and how the European market also for employee assistance providers can actually help shape the future of this industry. And as I told before, so we're going to start the conversation with Dale. We have already agreed on a set of questions and making this very interactive. But at the end, we're going to open for Q&As also. Okay, Dale, so much for coming. And it's a pleasure to actually have you on this DigiCafé first conversation live. And I know that you have a lot to share, as always, because I remember, many years ago when I entered this industry, I remember reading one of your compendiums. So actually, where to start if you are a Portuguese living in Lisbon and want to know about employee assistance programs? And I remember that your book was one of the first compendiums that I read. And I've been working in this field for many years now, so I remember vividly when I was around 26 and I learned the concept of EAP. So thank you so much for coming. And I know that our members are very excited to hear a little bit about you. So to start our conversation, I would like to ask you, after researching and studying employee assistance solutions for so many decades, how do you see the industry at this moment? What is your perception? And also, what are the critical challenges, but also the opportunities that EA providers can face?
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for having me. I am thrilled to start with Europe as the first talk that I'll be giving about the book and about other things. I'm terribly flattered that you want to hear my opinion, because you know what that means. I'm going to give it to you, okay? And I'm thrilled that it's with Europe. I really am. And you'll see as I talk more why I think Europe is so important today in the EAP field. Well, first of all, where do I see the industry now? And let me just say that I was blown away. This is the 5th compendium I've done, and I'm absolutely blown away by the growth of EAPs. And as we talk about the book later on, how many countries? And suddenly, EAPs are a common language. I mean, people know. I remember, I hate to tell you how many years ago when I say I'm in the EAP field and people would say, what's that? What's that? And now I am just flabbergasted. So that's the first thing that knocked me kind of for a loop when I saw how much is going on. And the book got bigger and bigger, as I went on. Well, there clearly is an emphasis on mental health and wellness worldwide. That became very clear. And as I talk about the book later on and what we found, you'll see that it's and I have some concern about the clinical aspects of this, which I will address. The other thing that clearly there's the embracing of technology. No doubt about it. Technology from Nigeria to South Africa, every place, the use of technology, which again has some concerns that I will raise. But I always kind of bring up the problems as well as the positives. So that's where I see the industry right now. Number one, it's bursting. Number two, tremendous emphasis on mental health. And three, the use of technology. But when I get into the book a little later, you'll also see that diversity becomes a question. Now, I believe you asked me about the challenges, right? And
yes, exactly.
I'm ready with all the challenges, okay? And let me tell you, bear with me, because they're what I see as the challenges. I know that some of you might not agree with me, but that's okay. That's always kind of fun, when we disagree. But these are my thoughts as I look at this. Number one, I broke them into clinical challenges and organizational challenges, okay?
Mhm.
Clinical challenges. I'm concerned that we're not connecting with the workplace. I see the counselors at home doing virtual counseling and the client at home, but I do not see as much connection with the workplace. We cannot lose that. That's what makes us unique. And for example, some of the authors said that their companies were crying for training for supervisors. And we're not, and once we lose that connection, what I'm concerned about is it's almost like EAPs are becoming a traditional mental health service, period. But they're not, we're not keeping our uniqueness. So we've got to get back, we've got to get back to the workplace. Now that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing virtual counseling, because I think there are a lot of benefits in that. But we also have to be sending the counselors. I mean, somebody's an EAP counselor, and if they've never been to the workplace, how the heck do they know, what's going on? So that's extremely important. The training of supervisors, they have to work with the managers. So I mean, that's a big concern. The next biggest concern is, why is everybody hiding from substance abuse and addiction? It was all mental health. And there's what, at least in the US, we're doing a great deal with co-occurring. If you have mental health problems, very often people drink or take a drug to deal with it. On the other hand, people that are into drugs are also depressed and have mental health problems. So I saw nothing about co-occurring. And in the US, at least, that is what it's called now. It's co-occurring. It's not one or the other. So I would please, plead with you to take a look at this. And I think that gets us into, who's training these EAP counselors? Who's teaching? Where are they getting it? From a variety of places. And the regular schools, I know in the US, they're not teaching this as a lot of what they should as far as the workplace and these issues. So the question of reconnecting with the workplace, as well as with because substance abuse is the problem in the workplace. I mean, who are we kidding? And why are counselors hiding from this? Now, I have a theory, and you'll probably all turn me off when I say this, and that'll be the end of the call. I think it's because substance abuse also is rampant among our own professions. So we don't want to look at this, and very often. So, I mean, it means a lot. We have to look at our own problems, our own self. So so I say, stop hiding substance abuse. The other
But also,
thing that I did, what?
just to add a little bit, is a little bit like the origin. We are coming very far away from the roots of EAP, but in a way,
That's right,
it's
exactly.
more relevant than ever, right? So looking back at the fact that employee system is within the workplace setting, it's not just some mental health support, general mental health support for the population, and also that the substance abuse and consumption and any kind of disorders that were at the foundation of EAP are still very predominant, right? Even in our profession.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, so we got to reconnect with the workplace. And, I didn't see, I mean, what about the whole question of workplace violence? What about the whole thing of critical incidents? All this kind of thing, getting back. So, get back to the workplace, but don't keep hiding substance abuse. And that's I think and that again was the history of EAPs. I mean, like it or not, EAPs grew out of addiction, and out of the alcohol field. And it was the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse in the United States that funded everything that got it going. I mean, they funded everything I did at the university for training. So, I mean, we got to get back. But I think this raises the real question of lack of training. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that our schools are not offering specialization anymore in, in the States with, even my own school, Maryland, it's closing the specialization. So where are people getting trained to work in the workplace, to work with managers? So I think, but when I talk about the role of Europe, we might have some answers, because I just don't want to raise all the problems. And then, there we are. So that's the second one. The third thing with the clinical that concerns me, I don't see any measurements going on. How do we know we're doing how do we know people are getting better? How are we measuring them? And I didn't see that in any of the write-ups that I got necessarily from the authors, as far as how are we measuring the technology and the using all of these techniques now as far as effectiveness. So we can't, but again, see, that gets us back to training and the lack of it. So we need to think about that in measuring outcomes. Now, organizationally, I might have a challenge as far as the organization goes, the challenging, and that's Europe, Asia, and the United States have large group. You have your groups, you have your organizations, but Africa is bursting with EAPs. The Middle East is bursting. Other areas are bursting. So we need to unify. We need to communicate, not just, for example, with a peer or the forum or EPA. In other words, it's like three different worlds. But that's where I see the role actually for Europe, as far as what we can do. Now, I know that's something you wanted to address, I think, later. So whenever you want to address that, I can.
You can go ahead, I think, because it's also interesting to understand the opportunities. You mentioned a lot of challenges. You now mentioned that there are, markets that are booming. They are really growing in terms of the employee assistance services. How do you see the role of Europe? Because our members are mainly from Europe, not just from Europe, but mainly.
Did you say that? What did I say? Did you say unions?
No, Europe, from Europe.
Well,
Yeah,
now I want to talk to you about Europe.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm also glad I misunderstood and said unions, because I don't want to leave them out. What the unions were not mentioned at all, and I'm not, because they really were the ones who really, also became very involved with programs. Well, now I'm going to put a lot of responsibility on Europe, or on you all, okay? Now, I see you all as being ready to take the leadership role in EAPs, in unifying, not the United States. I think I see you all more. Take the leadership role. I think you should explore various groups and how you might begin. We might want to think, and this is kind of, I got excited as I looked at this and thought about it, of bringing the groups together. Now, believe it or not, in about 10 years ago, this was tried in Geneva by a number of organizations that were led by the Council on Accreditation in the United States. And then there was Australia and other groups. And I actually have it here. It was called the Forum. And I was given the responsibility of writing all this up. And the idea then was, we have to come together have uniform international guidelines. All right. So that's where I see Europe as going beyond what you're doing in Europe, but bringing together. I don't know if we should consider maybe a thought group, of from obviously from the other areas, but to begin to think about what are the commonalities in this field of EAPs? What does this mean? And internationally, rather than necessarily, because what I'm seeing are three different groups operating wonderfully, doing really, really well. Look at what just happened in Bali. I mean, how many people? The same, you're going to have a big success in Prague. Well, but somehow the time has come to begin to put this together if we're going to have a unique field. And I think that's the challenge. Are we going to be a unique field in EAPs, or are we going to just get a morph, you might say, into the whole mental health area? Now, I see Europe as the group to pick this up. I think you should think about maybe having a thought group, a small group of people,
I
not
can
a
share with
conference.
you.
What?
We have been having at the board and with our members, particularly with our members, some discussions because we see that there's a lot of synergies and a lot of learnings, and there's different experience. The markets are different, of course, but we are reaching a level that we really need to, agree on specific, as you say, guidelines and standards for service, and be a voice for quality and for guaranteed outcomes, because we see a lot of in the market, and we are at EAF, we are very open to all kinds of new members, even coming from the tech field, or because we know that we need to be open in order to actually educate the market and guarantee the level of quality of the service provided, right, in the market. But it's becoming very fluid, the market, right? So we need to be open and not too conservative in our approach, and perhaps to work together with EPA, together with a peer. And we are planning activities already with a peer. And I think in the past we had already some joint discussions and forums with EPA. We also have members from India, APAC, Middle East. So we have a very diverse pool of members already at EAF, but we want to enlarge the discussion.
But where are these members? Are they part of EFA? Are they part of the forum, or what? The ones
No,
that...
we have at the EAF already members outside of Europe. I can't give you the precise numbers. Kenny is here. We at the end he can.
So you have
share.
now let me see if I understand what you're saying. You have another group that is forming?
No. Within EAF, we
What?
already have members. Within EAF, we
Yes.
already have members from outside of Europe, such as India, APAC, Middle East, and Africa too now. So we are enlarging our own members at EAF, not only European-based providers, but we are enlarging. But we are also developing partnerships with a peer, and also, I think, EPA. We had in the past some discussions already, but I don't want to enlarge too much because we have a lot of questions to cover. Second question that I would like you to really dive in is talk us about the recent book, the recent published book that you prepared, the compendium, and what are the key insights and learnings that you could share with our members, with the EAF?
Yes. Well, you were yes. The compendium. I feel like I've been living with this for a year practically. It's been really been something. Well, first of all, this is the fifth, and you really have to see it as a progression of how the field has changed. We started off, the very first compendium was done by my students at Maryland, and I decided we were going to do this internationally, and I made them go to the embassies in Washington, to do that, and that and then we progressed with the different ones, we had different sponsors for each of the compendiums that were done over the 5 years. We had Magellan, we had PPC, we had ICAS England, and of course now we had ICAS Europe and not ICAS World, and as you all know, Lyra took that over. So the sponsor now is Lyra. But you could see the changes and the developments through the years. Now, the unique thing about this compendium is that it was done after the pandemic, but with the others were all done before the compendium. That's before the pandemic. That's why I felt it was very important to find out what effect did this pandemic have on the world, you might say. Well, we had, much to my surprise, I couldn't believe 64 countries are involved. That we've got, so we have 58 authors, and a few of the authors did a couple, like the Nordic countries, one author did several. But we had them from obviously South Africa, Bangladesh, I mean, I cannot tell you, Australia, Argentina, Nigeria, Russia, Ukraine, China, the chapters, I mean, they just blew my mind as they came in and talked about EAPs like we were talking about them regularly. So that's the overall, and that's why now I asked the authors, what we did with the book is there were 3 questions that I asked them to address. Number 1 was, how had the pandemic affected their population, their people? And how did it affect the EAP field? And then also, what about the EAP field and the pandemic and where it is now and what's happened? I also asked about, interesting, not everybody responded to it. I asked about diversity in their country, so I will tell you what some of them said. And then, of course, I asked about technology. And these are the main things that we addressed in the book in which they responded. The book is about 450 pages. I have just settled on the lowest price I could because I am not interested in making money. I'm interested in getting the word out. So the book is it's going to sell for, I can tell you the price because I just settled on it before this talk today, $29 US, which is very,
very accessible, of course.
What?
Very accessible for everyone.
That's right. That's right. So it will be published with Amazon. So it will be available. That's the real point of it. And I think once the book is out there, that will also enable you all and whoever meeting with groups, in other words, of what to do, and where to go from there. Hopefully it will be helpful. Now, what I do have here is that I mean, I couldn't remember all 60 of them and what they said,
Of course.
but I did review them all, and I have some of the highlights if you'd like to hear them.
Of course, that's the question. What are the highlights and the impact
From the different countries? So I have some here that that I can give you of what they said about what they were doing. Okay, is that all right?
Go ahead.
Okay, Japan is very much into accreditation. Now they are, so that's a really good source for you all, because they actually still get accredited by the Council on Accreditation, which is a premier group in the United States. In the United States, I would recommend that Europe, as you move, that you connect with the COA, because in my opinion, they are more sophisticated and into what accreditation and values are than EPA. So I would try to reach out if you can, or let me know what I can do to help. But Japan, I helped Japan get the accreditation from COA. They adapted the accreditation standards for them. So that's an important thing. I would look at that. Now, India wrote and said that the pandemic was a game changer. That's the expression they used. And I know that you've seen what I have it on the wall here, what Manuel Sumner said about the pandemic, that the pandemic broke the worldwide stigma on mental health. So I think that's really, really very true. Now, something else that I want to talk to you a little bit about is from the United States, the U.S. Digital Archive. I don't know if you all are familiar with that. That archive has thousands of articles on employee assistance. They are available. They're free. For example, they have all my articles. They have all my books. They are available, and the university is invested in this. So that's a treasure. That's a treasure trove for anyone in the EAP field. So the archive, and Jody Fry, that you may know from the US, and Patricia Herlihy run it. But the university is doing this. So the United States, that's important resource for you all, is that whole thing. Now, China, used an expression called jingling. Jingling means it forced people to explore life's meaning. The pandemic did that. Now, I thought that's very thoughtful. Okay. Now, Scotland is the only country, the only one that came right out and said that substance abuse was their problem. And I would encourage you to read that one. I encourage you to read every one. One is more fascinating than the other. And he talks there about the extreme issue of substance abuse in Scotland. So it's a real eye-opener. The other thing that's happening that someone said to me, you've got to tell them about the dangers of what's happening in the United States, back to the substance abuse, or related also with Scotland, to phenethol and what's happening with the drugs. It has invaded us. We have so many overdose deaths. It's incredible. And as I looked at the statistic, Germany is the first European country that's being hit with this. You all are going to be hit with it. So you need to be aware. It's a big, big issue and a big problem. And that's, again, back to the workplace, okay? And alerting the workplace to this and letting them know about that. Now, Thailand has something interesting. They use for their masks, that we wear, that we worn, they use transparent masks, because they said that they wanted to be able to see the full face. So I thought that was really kind of unique and interesting. Bulgaria, on the other hand, has said that was one of the few countries that said that telephone counseling is still preferable. So, I mean, there are a few that are still doing that. Now, Poland, and I don't have a chapter on Poland, but it's mentioned in the European one, is mentioned, which I think is a major issue that we're not addressing, of the migrants and the the refugees, and the enormous problem that is. Now, how that affects the individual workplace, I think is a challenge. And I think it's a challenge for all of us, how we're going to deal with that and how we deal with that. And the last one that I want to mention is Nigeria, no, two more. Nigeria. Nigeria said what they liked about the fact that you could use and do the virtual is their offshore drillers were able to do it, okay, because of that. So of the fact that they do virtual, they could get help. Obviously, the drillers can't go running into the workplace. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, Ukraine sent me a video that right up front, I'd say maybe within the first 3-4 months of my writing the book. Now, what Ukraine did, she wrote when I had deadlines for everybody, and you got to get the hook in at this time. And she had written back and said, I need several months extension because it's difficult to write with the missiles flying. I said, oh my God, So anyway, she went, I forget, I think it was to Ireland. She was asked to speak about delivering mental health services during the war. And she did a video that she sent me. It's on my webpage. And numbers of people have seen it. So that's available for you. So that was really kind of a summary of some,
a summary, a very short summary.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting, and also, if we consider our members, and you mentioned a lot of challenges, there are multi challenges, and you mentioned also opportunities. There are challenges relating. You mentioned also opportunities,
right? Exactly.
That we can grab. And one final question before we open up for Q&A.
Right.
If you had right now, at this moment, a business in employee assistance, what would be your top priorities to adapt to this market? What would you do? What would be your decisions, your investments? If you would be a business owner, and you are a business owner, of course, but imagine you are an employee assistance provider in Europe or anywhere in the world, but in Europe also. What would be your priorities to adapt to this market?
You mean to start?
Yeah. What would you do immediately? What would you be focusing on in your business to make it successfully and adapt to this technology, new problematics at the workplace, and also opportunities like video counseling, reach people where they are, right?
I would also want to know, wherever my geographical area is, what are the workplaces? What are the main companies? What are the main organizations? What is the main product that they're producing? I would study the workplace as well as I would study, the different things that I need for this, because you have to adapt for that. In other words, can you provide services on site? Let me tell you, I do want to mention that the most successful programs in the United States are those where counselors are on site. And many of them still are. Some of our premier multinationals, like IBM and Pfizer and companies like that, still employ counselors on site. So in any event, I would offer that. If I was starting a bit, I would offer on-site services. I would try to be a little different besides the technology. So I would look at on-site. I would also look at unions. What's going on? Do your companies have unions? Or they may not. So, I mean, how do you involve the union? Unions are, very pro EAPs. but unions also have the addiction problem, so I would look at that. But at least in the beginning, that's where I would go. But I would try to set up, when I sell my program, I would sell it on the idea that I'm also going to do cost effectiveness and show how we really are making a difference in the workplace. So I would sell outcome measurements because companies want that. They think that way. Oh,
Great suggestions, great insights, and really looking forward to read your book. I will
okay,
open up I will open up the floor now to everyone who's in the call.
okay.
So do connect with your video and do ask any question to Dale. We have Dale here to have a conversation with. So she just presented some of the insights, some of the learnings, some of the sharings that she's been working on in her compendium. She has a lot of years in research in employee assistance around the world. So to our members that are here with us live, do you have any questions? Just switch on your camera, switch on your mic, and go ahead. Kenny, would you like to start with any comments or sharing?
Where is he? There's Kenny. Hi, Kenny. I don't see him.
I'm not sure. No questions from the ones here, but do go ahead. Kenny, hello.
Hello,
Hello.
Kenny. Hey, how
Hi,
are you?
Dale.
Good to
Great
see
seeing
you.
you. Yes, it's been a while.
Yeah, I'll say. I hope this was helpful.
This is excellent. Thank you so much for being here on the first episode of DigiCafé. And couldn't imagine anyone better for this. You're
Thank
such a pioneer in the industry, so it's a great way to start it off.
Yeah, I'm sorry
Um,
I'm not going to Prague, but I'm really kind of overwhelmed. The book is right now in production and we're proofreading and we're doing all of that stuff. Okay. But
yeah,
thank you.
but
Thank you, Kenny was wonderful at giving me contacts. So thank you.
yeah, it's our pleasure. The EAEF is here to really promote the industry, and giving you access to our members is really the ideal for this compendium. So I think many were quite honored to have received that email from you to
Oh,
participate. So big thank you from all of
anytime.
our members.
Anytime, anything I can do, ask me. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah. So, question for you, because I remember, somebody made a comment a long time ago. I was not there, but supposedly at an EAEF conference, somebody stood up and said, EAP is dead.
The EAP is
And
what?
is dead. It's a
Dead.
dying industry,
Oh,
but clearly it's not.
no,
From your
no.
from your perspective, where do you see we've seen a big shift towards integrated programs, EAP a lot more involved within with health providers, especially digital health providers. Where do you see if there's any risks associated to the quality of service when something is bundled into physical healthcare? It's a tough
Well,
question.
it should be. Well, because really it's hard to separate physical from mental, but I think again, it puts a lot of the responsibility back on what the point I said about studying and knowing some outcome measurements in what we're doing. So if one is going to ally with the physical, I think there's more awareness today of the mental and the physical being realizing they need that. But I think that's why I think we got to get our act together. We got to get the act together and not be so split. So we really are a force, because to be to compete with the physical, that's a big deal because
Yeah.
in size. So that's why my point about unifying and pulling all of the groups together, not only Europe, but drag the United States in and, in Asia, I think we got to get a force. That's why I think we got to unify ourselves first, too, to be strong enough.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
What'd you say?
a lot of work for us.
That's right. A lot of work.
A
Right.
lot of work for us, but yeah, but just to add to what Kenny was sharing, we had our board meetings in December and we did this kind of strategic revision. We have Karsten is helping us with some of the communication and marketing, and okay, let's put our heads together and what do you see in the future, like 7 years from now? And we actually came with a lot of the challenges that you are sharing with us, Dale, that we need to unify. We need to go further with the quality, with the outcomes measurement, with accreditation, to be a body that could actually not just congregate different kind of providers, but enables the providers to be validated, technically sound, and be able to actually provide the level of quality and
Yeah,
service.
I want to show you something. This book, this is what was done when the group met in Geneva and called themselves the mission of the forum. This was 10 years ago in Geneva, was to create a global movement among professional and employer associations in the development of international guidelines. And that's what we need. That's why I think you need a force above this. And that's why, Kenny, I'm so glad, you're on this, because I think, we're going to have a super group. Now, I think besides the Council on Accreditation, I think you ought to look, what about Bocconi? You know, that university in Italy, it's praised tremendously for its business. And they have
Oh,
brought,
yes, it's a business school, isn't it? I think it's a business.
yes, as a matter of fact, the Financial Times said that Bocconi is the second best business school in Europe. So they would bring me every year and I would go and lecture. So, I mean, you need to find some kind of a group. Now, in the case of the forum that we had, as I say, the council was involved. You might want to look at Europe. I shy away from the United Nations because that, and all of that, because that's, something else again. No, I think that you might want to think of, is there an overall, behavioral health or group? I'm not sure. Or else form it yourself, like they call themselves the forum. So, I mean, you might want, like Kenny, you might want to bring the different presidents together of the groups and just start in a very small group just to kind of toss some of this around. But I mean, I am, look at the size of this thing. And, it's a whole thing on how and that was 10 years ago. And it didn't, it went so far. The US government put some money in. By the way, that's always a resource. The National Institutes of Health in the United States. Now, your problem there, and I'll be, perfectly blunt, is EPA does not work as well as I think they should with the whole federal government. The federal government, in the United States is a real resource for you. But how the devil you're going to be able to circle around that, we're going to have to figure out, okay? Because EPA is not, they bother me because they're not involved. They used to be involved much more. As a matter of fact, the US government funded remember Almaca, that name was what EAP was, and they funded everything for years. So there are resources like that should be looked at, but I would not rely on EPA that way. But the federal government, so we have to figure that out, how to get back into that.
Yeah,
Dr. Ronald Anderscheid is very
I
good.
believe Anka
Had
also
one
has
to
a
ask the
question.
question. I'll shut up. Okay, go ahead.
No. Anka, I think, has another question for you, Dale.
Thank you, Dale, for all the insights. It's a pleasure meeting you. I'm calling in from Geneva.
How what?
I am calling in from Geneva.
Okay, hello, thank you.
Thank you for all the insights you have given us. It was really interesting. I have a question specific to addictions.
Good.
Is what is the role of EAP in dealing with addictions in the workplace, and how do we measure the outcomes of that?
Oh, good question. Well, first of all, you need to train the managers and supervisors. That's what EAPs are about. You train, and I still have all that material, how you train them to look at what we call is constructive confrontation. But you train the managers and supervisors to look for what the signs are, all right? Absenteeism, lateness, things like this, sleepiness, signs like this. You train the managers and supervisors, but then you also train them in how they confront an employee. And I don't like to use the word confront because it sounds like it's, a fight, but how they then encourage them to get help and realize, but you got to train the managers, because the managers and supervisors drive you crazy. They let things go on that are unbelievable. So you have that's the door in for you.
And then the outcome measurement, I think also, how do you actually then assess
Measure well, outcome measurements are, you have to look, for example, you have to look at before and you have to look at after. In other words, before somebody, or if you're talking about individual, or, you want to look at before and then you want to look at after. But outcome measurements, as far as the programs and what's going on, are extremely important.
Great, great. I don't know if
Thank
we have
you.
another question. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Brigitte, do you have another question? No?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Hi, Dale, and thank you. It's been very, very interesting to listen to you.
Thank you.
I've been sitting here wondering about, what is it we need to do to come together? And I'm actually one of those saying, why did we let addiction go? Why are we so afraid of touching it? Because that is a huge problem. And the other thing that's really on my mind, and I had a conversation with Alex, another one on the board, the other day. He was in London about clinical governance. If we are going to fight with or work alongside the physical one, we need to have our clinical governance in place. And I said, why hasn't anyone discussed that topic on our conferences for the last 8 years when I have been there?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to explain it a little more.
So clinical governance, the
What?
aspect clinical
Go ahead.
governance, because
Governance.
there's a topic that we haven't been working on, right? And
Clinical governance?
Yeah.
I'm not. What does that mean? I'm not sure.
That means, at least in Europe, that means what are the clinical standards? So that goes down to all you're talking about, accreditation of our counselors, how we do what do we do with risk, all of those things. So the manual about how do we keep the company, so the organization, our customer, our client, and ourselves as a provider safe when it comes to handling the client and the relationship with the client.
Do you mind, Liliane, explaining?
Yes, it's about clinical standards and accreditation. It's about what you mentioned before, Dale. It's actually very linked, because what Brigitte was sharing is that we haven't worked at EAF, at least. We are not talking about other bodies, but we haven't worked as much as we should in the clinical standards practice and all the accreditation to ensure quality and also outcomes, of course, but first ensure quality and consistency, right? In terms of the way, and I think
where do your people get trained clinically?
At universities, but not specifically linked to employee assistance.
No, not at all. That's right. That's the problem. And well, not only that, but never mind the universities, you got to train the faculty first, because the I mean, you have students, but you don't have, that's the problem, because faculty, how you teach that. So that's important. So, you know, you might start with a cadre of potential, oh, this is exciting, being a professor. You might reach out to a university, and are there any faculty there that are interested in learning how? And then, for example, I did a whole thing, which I have, is how to be an associate professor in employee assistance. In other words, and what you teach in the curriculum. So I'd be interested in working with people in that. What? Yeah.
That's a great challenge, and also more homework for EAF. Can we?
That's right. But no, really, that's a whole curriculum of how you become a faculty member to teach this. That's right. And what
that's great. And I think, you know, we have also a contribution from one of our members saying, working for years in physical, mental health and EAP, your experience and message is gold. For so many organizations, thank you for sharing. So I think, you know, we need to wrap up the conversation, but I just wanted to mention first that your insights there were amazing. We have a lot of homework to do at EAF. And it's quite aligned with what our members are sharing with us, we have been discussing at the board, and the view, as you're saying, the challenges didn't disappear. The old challenges of EAP didn't disappear at all. And we need to move past the technology dream and illusion and really get back to the basics and the core of competences and train new people to work in this field.
Absolutely.
To ensure that we really have a voice. We really have a voice for employee assistants around the world.
That's right.
And that we are able to differentiate ourselves to general
and grab it now. Grab it now, all of you, before we lose it. Because right now we're very acceptable. People are happy with us. Let's grab it right now. And I just want to say I'm available. Let me be of help to you in any way that I can.
We are going to contact you, Dale, for sure.
That's fine. That's fine.
We're going to run after you and check everything.
Well, we got to train people to train others. Okay.
Right. Thank you
Dale,
so much.
I have you on speed dial, Dale, so I'll call you soon.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. So this is the wrap up of our first DigiCafé. And we are learning as we go. We're going to make it even better, the conversation. But thank you so much for the one who joined live, because it makes all the difference that this is not just, you know, like a presentation, but it's really a live conversation, and we are headed for the future. So see you next time. And thank you, Dale, and we'll be in touch because we have a lot of work to do.
That's fine. I'm available. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.